In this video, I'm going to give you 5 things you can do to a VLOOKUP formula that is going to make it completely unbreakable. This is Bulletproof VLOOKUPs.
Okay, so we've got some data here that I've pulled together. We've got some order data on this sheet, which includes a customer name and a product name. We then have information on a customer table about each customer. And then we also have a product table which contains information about each product. In this demonstration, what we're going to do is pull together some customer information onto this order table so that we can then subsequently analyze this information by various attributes of the customer, such as the region that they live in or something like that. So before I show you how to improve these VLOOKUPs with these 5 key ways in which they're going to become bulletproof, what I'm quickly going to do is add a basic VLOOKUP formula onto the sheet and then get back to you. Okay, so here we have a very bog standard VLOOKUP. So we are looking up, as you can see, the customer name, which is in E2. We're looking for that in the customer table. Now, critically, as you should know already, the customer name has to be in the very first column of our lookup table. And we are returning the information in the 3rd column where it matches. So that, in this case, is going up to the top, the region. So just quickly then, this is the kind of thing that can go wrong with this formula or is not ideal about it. The first thing is, if we simply drag that across and hope that somehow we're going to pick up the customer segment by doing that, then we are sadly mistaken, because because we're not fixing our ranges, then we're going to be picking up, we're looking now at the order date rather than the customer. We're also looking at the customer table from column B to E, which we can see here is not going to help us at all. And again, if we start dragging this formula down, now it might work to start with, but sooner or later we're going to start getting failures, because again, we're now looking at, you can see we're now not starting in the right row. Now we've established the pitfalls of a very basic VLOOKUP. Let's go straight in to point number 1. Okay, let's get improving these formulas then. Right, step 1. We're now going to fix the cells so that we can now drag the formula down without worrying about the fact that ranges are changing or anything like this. So I've stripped it back to the single original formula that we put in the cell here. So let's have a quick look at this formula. So you can see that we're picking up the customer name as E2 here. So the very first thing we want to be doing is, that is always going to be column E, but we do not, so we need to add the $sign. Row 2, we want to change as we drag the formula down. As far as the table on the customer sheet goes, that will always be starting in A1. So I'm just pushing F4 there to instantly put the $sign in front of both the A and the 1, meaning that will be fixed. And the D796 will also be fixed. We're picking up the region, which is region 3, and we want an exact match, so we'll leave that as false. Okay, so now we have Atlantic there. I'm just going to drop that down and scan down, and we should be error-free. Yes, we are. Okay, so that is step 1. Step 2, we now want to convert to entire column ranges. Okay, so again, if we look at our lookup formula up here, you can see that we're picking up the customer table from A1 to D796 there. Now, if we just go to this customer table, we can see where that is. Big issue with this is that any single extra customer is going to mean that that lookup formula will fail because they will miss them. Now, there's several ways that we can deal with this. One way would be to simply maybe go up to 1,000. You know, move the range so that we're picking up more rows, or 10,000, or whatever we want. And that would guarantee that we would pick up a few more customers, but it would not be bulletproof. There is no guarantee that things can't change dramatically. You could be involved in some kind of merger or takeover, and you could be looking to use this spreadsheet when your customer file jumps from, as in here, 796 up to 100,000. Adding numbers to a formula does not make a great deal of sense, in my opinion. The second thing is that we could use a named range to define this table, and we could make that name range bigger, but to me that will suffer from the exact same issue in the short term. We could go down the route of creating dynamic name ranges and things like that. So let's just keep things simple. It's far better if we change the formula. So instead of picking up a set region on the customer table, we simply highlight those 4 columns, push F4 to fix them. We now have the ability to cope with an infinite number of customers. What we're now going to do is use the match formula within our VLOOKUP to ensure that we are always going to pick up the correct column. Right, we're really into the meat of improving these VLOOKUPs now. So, one of the key disadvantages of VLOOKUP formula is its hard-coded column number within the formula itself, which in this case is this number 3 here. What this means is that dragging formulas across or copying and pasting them in any way across columns will not change that number at all. So what we're going to end up with is, in this circumstance, we will not pick up that customer segment, we will simply pick up the region again. What it also means is that if for some reason the columns on our customer file were to switch, we then start picking up the wrong information completely. We don't pick up the region at all. So that's no good either. So what we want to do is create a formula which will cope with columns moving around, and ideally we would want to be able to copy and paste this formula between columns and it still work. I've just gone back to the original formula, well, not the original formula, the formula where we've corrected the referencing and we're using whole column references. So now we're going to add in our match formula. And the way I want to do this is I want to add a few rows at the top so that we can add some additional lookup information. I'm going to use the top row for this purpose to link to the actual columns we want to pick up in our new VLOOKUP. So the region, we'll click on there. And this one, we want to be the customer segment, so we'll just do that. I can now actually give this a more sensible name, given that it's on an order sheet of customer region. So avoid any confusion between the order region, perhaps. The key offending instrument is this number 3, so we need to use our match formula to generate a number 3, and we want that match formula when copied and pasted into other columns to generate the appropriate number for those lookup columns too. What we are trying to do now is to create our match formula. So we're going to use the match formula to look up our column header that we want to pick up, which is there, and it will always be in the first row. So we need to fix the row, but not the column. We want to try and find this on our customer table, within the header row of our customer table, which is row 1, and will always be row 1. And that will return the position of the column within our highlighted area. So it will say, where is region within this table? And it will return a 3. We want to always have an exact match, so we're going to use a 0 on the end of that, and that will give us our 3. We will then see when we move that over here, it will give us our number 4, and that is exactly what we want it to do. So now all we need to do is slot this formula back into our VLOOKUP in place of our number 3. So that will be our new formula. I will enter that, and we will now see that I should be able to paste this, and there we go. Voila, customer region and customer segment. So how robust is this formula then? Well, let's have a mess around with the customer table and see what it can stand up to. Let's insert a column here. Let's move that one over here. And yeah, why not put a completely random column in called, I don't know, first name. Now let's go back and have a look. Perfect. Still working. No doubt you're wondering how I can get even more flexible and robust a VLOOKUP than we've already got. Well, the answer is we are going to use the column formula to detect where our lookup range is starting. Now, one of the issues with what we've done so far is that the match formula we've put in to detect the column is assuming that our lookup range will start in column A. So if I go and insert an extra column in here so that it now starts in column B, although all of the references in the formula will move, this match will cause an error because it's going to return wherever the region is within the first row and give us it'll add an extra column on. Returning to our original formula, what we can now do is adjust it to account for where the first column of the lookup table is going to be. So in order to do that, what I need to do is deduct the first column by using the column formula, going to the customer table, selecting the first column and fixing that. So what that will now do is take away the number of the first column of the range. Now we need to add back 1 to that because when it's in column A, we don't want it to deduct any number. If it's in column B, we need it to deduct 1 from the column. So the reason why, I will hit enter and I will just show you the reason why that is. So region is at the moment in column E, which is the 5th column. If I insert a column here, it's now in the 6th column, but actually it's only the 5th column of our lookup table. So we want that match formula. That match formula, because it's using the whole of this sheet, will return a 6. We need then to deduct a 1 from that because we've got 1 blank column. So by detecting this column here, which will give us a number 2, and then adding back that column itself, that will adjust for the right. So what you see now is that this formula is now working again. So if I now drag that across here and down, we should now be able to insert columns to our heart's content in here, move these columns around, And as long as customer name remains the first column of our lookup table, it no longer now needs to be the first column on our sheet. And again, everything is working perfectly. So we've reached the fifth and final step in our steps to a bulletproof VLOOKUP. Step 5 is basically the icing on the cake. We've made this formula about as flexible as it can possibly be, but what we need to do just in case is we need to trap any potential errors that do occur and make sure that we know that they are erroring. We're going to actually return some useful information to the user so that they know there is an error. This last step is actually one of the more simple steps in the whole process. What we're going to do is embed the whole of our formula that we have created within an if error formula. And what this is going to allow us to do is choose the value we want to return should our formula generate an error. And I should say in the very unlikely circumstance that our formula would generate an error. Anyway, what I'm going to do is actually put a number 0. What I find helpful is that if we want something to stand out in a column, it's quite useful to have a number appear within a column of text. In the same way that we would, if we were generating a column of numbers, I might actually use, say, the word error, or put something like that on the end, maybe. And that would give us the word error in capital letters. Now, in a column of numbers, that will really stand out. But in a column of text, actually a number stands out better. So I will now just copy and paste that formula throughout. And what I'm going to do is pick, say, this customer, remove them from the table so that we can see what it will look like with an error generated. So I'll just take that customer out there. And you can see straight away that we are generating errors here. And what this allows us to do is to have some form of error count at the top by putting a COUNTIF formula here. We can see now we can use this cell to show us how many errors we have in our formula. And that's just one example of what we might do with this return. The beauty of doing something like this, rather than letting a formula generate a #NA error, is that it will still, if it's a column of numbers, it will still allow us to sum that column. Whereas if we generate an actual error, as you know, you cannot sum a column which has a system error in it. You will just, your sum formula, for example, will return a system error. A quick recap then of our 5 steps to a bulletproof VLOOKUP. So in step 1, we used $signs to fix our range and cell references. So we made sure that we can copy and paste this formula between different columns and rows, and it will hold the table reference static and make sure that we're always picking up the correct column to look up. In this case, it was the customer name. Secondly, we converted our ranges to use entire column ranges. And the beauty of this meant that we were not restricting the number of fields in our lookup table, and it can grow to the full limit of Excel, which at the time of this video publication is well over 1 million entries. Thirdly, we then moved on to tackle the thorniest issue within the VLOOKUP formula, the hard-coded number, which is the column reference that we want to pick up. And we basically made this dynamically look up the actual column that we want from our lookup table and return its column number. Therefore, meaning that we can now finally rid ourselves of that hard-coded number. This allows us to reference something on our spreadsheet and we were then able to copy and paste this formula around the spreadsheet into various different columns without having to change our formula at all. Next, we added a belt and braces type measure where we actually decided that we wanted to be able to insert columns in front of our lookup table. So this is particularly useful if you're giving this a spreadsheet with the lookup formulas in to another person and you want them to be unrestricted in what they want to do. So they may not be a particularly experienced user and therefore start inserting columns left, right and centre. You don't want your formulas to mess up. So this will ensure that your lookup will always know where its first column of its lookup table is. And finally, we caught any errors by using the if error formula, embedding our whole formula within that to return some kind of useful information to the user or ourselves, which I demonstrated you could be used to identify errors and add an error count or something like that.
So there you have it. 5 steps to a bulletproof VLOOKUP, the closest you'll get to an unbreakable Excel VLOOKUP formula. So don't forget to hit the subscribe button for more tips, tricks and techniques to improve your productivity in Excel. Thank you for watching.